Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. We are here today to discuss character building and development with children. I am delighted to be joined here by Christine Ma-Lau, who is the founder and principal of the JEMS Character Academy. Is it JEMS or JEMS?
It's actually both.
Okay.
It's JEMS because it sounds like, a gemstone, but it actually is JEMS as well because it stands for Junior Excellent Members of Society.
Great.
So it's both.
Just want to clarify that, especially for our viewers as well.
Thanks for having me.
So just to kick things off, what does character building and development even mean? Some people might think, it's something that someone's born with, or it's something they develop just due to their outside environment. But what does it mean to be actively conscious of building the character of a child?
And that's a great question, and we get that a lot. I actually think it's a combination of different things. I think partly it is something that we're born with. I think we have tendency to have certain character traits over others. I do think so much of it is to do with the environment that we're in. And then so much of it is also what we choose to focus on. And so one model that I really like is what they call the caught, taught, sought model. And I think it has to be a combination of these things. Caught is what people usually think about character. Never really had to learn it, I just kind of lived life and I grew in these, traits. And sure, yeah, it's that you've caught certain values and traits and virtues from the people around you. And so that's a big part of character. If you are immersed in an environment or with people that, exhibit certain character traits, you're more likely going to, show them as well. But I think that there is such merit and such importance in also having it taught. And that's because we want to make it intentional. I mean, if we're going to put in the time and the effort to highlight to someone, what is important in life, I think that the time should be given, to character and its development. But the third part that I think is really important in this whole process is sought. It's that we want to inspire kids to be better people, and I think that's what character development is at the end of the day, is that we want to be better people for ourselves, but also for our communities. And if that's the case, then we want them to seek that out. We want them to actively and consciously choose to be better people. And what are the components that make a better person? It is being kind, it's being thankful, it's being humble, it's being responsible, having perseverance. It's all those things that make you a better person, once again, for yourself and for your community. And so I would say that character development is a combination of all those things. It's about having it caught in the environment that you're in. It's having it taught by the people around you, whether very intentionally or not, you are being taught, character and its values. But then I think a really important part of it is, having it sought, seeking it out and choosing to want to be a better person for yourself and for the people around you.
So what is the appropriate age for a child to start being taught these things? I think a lot of parents might be hesitant or they don't quite know exactly when these types of things should be, fed to their child about starting to learn empathy and generosity and things like that. Is there a sweet spot for when these types of things can start being taught to a child?
And I know every educator will say the sooner the better, but I really mean it in our case. I really do think that things like this can be taught right from the get-go, because you're teaching kids, part of it is teaching them about emotions, right? And that's part of your interaction and your relationship building with your baby even. It's showing them that, different people have different emotions, that he or she is experiencing different emotions as well, that, that there can be empathy, through that. And and I do think that obviously a character of virtue will look different according to the different ages, but I do think it can start very early on. So even, babies, toddlers that are playing with each other, there is a concept of sharing. There's a concept of being patient. There's a concept of thinking about how other people feel, being inclusive. Those are all things that you can teach even to, babies and toddlers. And will they completely get it? No, but that's true with language too, right? We're going to use long words with, kids. We're going to, read books with words that they will not understand. But that's because we believe that, they are taking it in, and one day they will exhibit those, those behaviors, those character traits, in the same way they start saying words that we didn't know that they knew because we'd read them to them. We'd said them to them much earlier on. So I think the earlier the better. Yeah.
So is there a character trait that you feel, in your opinion, is the most important to be teaching a child? Or what are the first ones that are maybe the most important to start from the beginning?
This is, I get asked this question, and it is the most difficult question to answer because it's like asking me which of my kids do I love the most, and I can't answer that. But I would choose, I say I would choose a couple, and this is my personal preference. I would say that thankfulness is a big one. And I think that and there's so many studies to show that gratitude is connected to so many other positive outcomes and other positive virtues. So, just even using happiness. I mean, everyone says they want their kids to be happy. Well, how do you help them to be happy? It's not giving them more. It's not, buying them more things. It's really teaching them to be grateful for what they have. And so I think thankfulness is a big one for me. And the great thing about it is that you can teach it so easily in that you can just help them cultivate this this behavior by asking them what are 3 things they're grateful for at the end of each day. It's called the 3 good things, and studies have shown that after doing it for 40 days consecutively, that subjects that took part in this showed that they were happier, had better relationships, had lower blood pressure, and just were obviously more grateful for all the things around them. So I think it's a great one to start with, saying thank you, being thankful for what they have. The second one I would choose is empathy. And I think that's a big one for me because I think if you have empathy, meaning you can understand, first you have to understand your own emotions, but empathy being that you understand other people's emotions and their situations. I think if you have that understanding, then a lot of other things can come from it. If you have empathy, you know where someone's at, then you can choose then to show kindness, you can show compassion, and you can show respect because you value that person and where they're coming from and what the emotions that they're showing. And so I would, empathy would be high on the list for me. And in our household, we always talk about kindness. What's a kind thing to do? Were you kind today? And I think kindness, we think of it as being, it is something that you do to other people. But when you do that, once again, it gives you that joy that you've made, someone else happy. I ask my kids, if you were kind to someone else, who's happy? You've made your other people happy, but you've also made yourself happy. And so that's doubling your happiness as opposed to, just doing something for yourself. That's only one person being happy. So kindness multiplies happiness. And so kindness is something that I would highlight as one of my top 3 as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So far we've been talking about mainly, in-house, coming from the parents. I think there's a lot of varying opinions and possibly even debate over how exactly, character building and development should and can be taught to a child. Obviously, some people think this should exclusively be the responsibility of a parent, while others, certainly rely on educators to be someone who is conveying this to a child as well, especially when they start being in school for, 6-7 hours a day or something like that. So where is the balance, between the parent being the one conveying this versus an educator? Are there any lines that shouldn't be crossed when it comes to that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I personally think that it takes a village to raise a child, right? And I think this really cannot be outsourced, nor can it be siloed to one person or one group of people in a child's life. And I think the thing is, every person that comes into a child's life is a character educator. I remember hearing a story of a parent who was talking about choosing a cello teacher, for her daughter. Her daughter would only see this cello teacher once a week, but she knew that the so-called best cello teacher was someone who was very harsh, said very mean words, and was very disrespectful to the helpers at home, and would shout at them. And this was something that was known about this teacher. And this parent that's talking to me was like, it doesn't matter to me how great a cello teacher she is, because my child will see the way that she acts and will learn from that. And so, sure, this cello teacher is not a character education teacher, is not a parental figure in this child's life, but will come into contact with this child, as an older person, would somehow be a role model, and so would be imparting their character and their values, to this child. And so this parent told me, she was like, I wouldn't hire her as a cello teacher because I wouldn't want my child to have to, learn from this person. And so I think that, every person that comes into a child's life is a character educator. And I think part of the reason I really feel strongly about us needing to be intentional about it as parents, as educators in schools, in para schools, anywhere where a child is because our children now have an additional character educator, and that is media. and social media, right? Never before did our kids watch as many YouTube videos as our kids do now, right? And it's like, you know, there's no end to what kind of videos they can, you know, tap into now, right? And so those have become their character educators, essentially, right? And are those really exhibiting the character values and virtues we want our kids to have? Depends on what you're watching. And I think if our voices are not louder, if our relationship with our kids is not stronger than the ones that they have with their iPads, then I think that we're setting ourselves up for trouble. And so I do think it takes everyone coming together. And I would just also say that it takes everyone coming together to be aligned. And I you know, for example, even as parents, you know, to come together and say that these are our core values for our kids, to come together with the school and say these are things that I care about, and I really hope that as, you know, teachers, as parents, that we can work together to convey this message to our child. Because the one thing I would hate is if, for example, the kid's learning about being honest, you know, at school, and you know, you have to be honest, and yet they practice that at home, and let's say they say something that hurts other people's feelings. Oh, do I look nice in this dress? No, this dress is ugly. How could you say such a thing? You know, you shouldn't be saying things like that. I'm not saying that they should, but they are learning. They're in the process of learning what it means to be honest. They should learn tact and empathy, but they're practicing that, right? And if they're shut down for it, I think it doesn't help them in the process, in the journey of learning honesty. And so I think there has to be that continual, you know, communication and collaboration between all parties to say that these are the things that we care about, these are the things that we want to highlight, these are the things that we've seen, and these are the things we want to reflect to the child on, to say, hey, well done, you've done this really well, I applaud you, and how can we develop this further? I think that is a collaborative effort on all fronts.
So you just brought up a lot about the notion of role models, basically, and as you mentioned, this can come from the internet now, really. And so, you know, how can, whether it's a parent or an educator, how can one be conscious of acknowledging that they are actually a role model to a kid? I don't think it'd be controversial to say kids imitate adults, or they imitate their role models. So how does one maintain, you know, continual consciousness that they should maintain that position of being a role model at a, you know, in a consistent way?
Yeah, I think I would hope that we all choose to be people that seek out character. You know, we talked about earlier that we hope that, you know, kids will seek it out, and I hope that as adults we will actively seek it out. And you know, I think sometimes we might fall into the trap to say that, hey, as adults, I've got it all together, I have great character, and now I just need to, you know, impart it on the kids. But I think it's a journey for all of us. I mean, I've been even in this field for 12 years now, and I feel like every day I'm learning I need to grow in my character. And every day I think about the things that I need to grow in. Like, you know, a while back, I was looking at, kind of doing an assessment of my own, you know, character report card for myself. It's not anything external, but I was like, I don't really think I'm perseverant enough. You know, that's something I feel like I really should strengthen. And so I decided that, you know, I was going to run 10K, and I don't run, I hardly exercise. So this was a big deal for me. But that was because I really wanted to grow in it, you know, and in that process, of course, I'm sharing with the kids. I'm like, you know, hey, I feel like that's something that I really need to develop, and so that's why I'm going to put more time and effort, you know, into developing. And I think choosing that and walking through that is already a type of role modeling. But I think on a day-to-day basis, I think it's just keeping in mind that all eyes are on you all the time. You know, I don't think that there is a time when I'm sitting down reading a book with my child, and therefore we should talk about great values and I should show my great moral character. But then I pick up the phone and my friend's called, and, you know, I gossip about someone else, or I say bad things about someone else. Those two are not separate. They're always listening. They're always watching. And even if they're not, I think, I mean, what kind of person do we want to be, right? If we're telling our kids that we want them to be, you know, people of character, what does that mean? And are we like that 360? Or are we just like that, you know, for a portion of our time, or, you know, of our lives? So I think it's just being intentional and wanting to be the best version of ourselves, not only for ourselves, but I think as parents and as educators, it's, I want to be the best that I can be so I can give the best that I have, you know, to them. And so I think it's just something that requires just constant reminders to ourselves. Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit here, I think many parents would like to know what are some of the best approaches in handling a child who might have a tough temper to deal with?
You know, for troubleshooting questions like these, I think one thing I always encourage parents to do is to first be a detective, because I think it's very easy to diagnose and to treat the symptoms, but it's more important that we get to the root of it. And 10 different kids could be having temper tantrums, but they could be having it for 10 different reasons. And yes, you can, tell them to stop and give them calming strategies and all of that. But if they are having a temper tantrum because, for example, they've been bullied at school, well, telling them not to have a temper isn't going to help them in their situation at school where they're being bullied. Or they could be having a tough time because they could be worried that their parents are having issues and, might have arguments and might be getting a divorce. I mean, I had a kid tell me that, and he was very sad all the time, was not engaged, and we'd have temper tantrums. And when we got to the bottom of it, he was like, well, it's because I actually think my parents are going to get divorced, which wasn't the case, but that was what he was going through. And so when you tell him not to have, temper tantrum, it doesn't actually, address the real issue. So I think just even pulling back from that question, it's being a detective, trying to find out what are the root heart issues behind it. So I think there's that. But then I think also trying to figure out, in being a detective, is trying to figure out what the triggers are. There's certain things that will trigger our kids. And it might be when they're hungry. I know I'm more easily triggered when I'm hungry.
I am too.
Or when we're sleepy, or things like that. So we can work out a pattern like, oh, it doesn't work out well. I mean, maybe it could be that we're overstretching our kids. Maybe after a long day of school, yeah, some kids can go and do, 2 different sports and read 5 books afterwards. But for some kids, they can't handle it. And if we can, recognize that, then we can make adjustments to then see, oh, would that actually help this behavior? But, that's kind of like the back end. But I think, when it actually happens, I think there are a couple of, things that you could do. I think the first is giving them space to actually kind of let it out. I know that it might not always be the place and time for that, but I do think that having let it out could sometimes have them vent it out, but then to debrief and talk about it afterwards. So to analyze the situation. So what do you think? What happened there? What do you think made you upset? What did it feel like? And to get that understanding of where they're at. And then I think there are calming strategies, right? Like one thing that we do with students is have them make a calm down bottle. And so they shake out, we talk about shaking out all the anger, shaking out all the frustration, and then they'll see the glitter, it's kind of calm, and we're like, well, take deep breaths. So that's a big thing, right? Taking deep breaths. So they'll look at it and they'll take deep breaths as they're watching the glitter kind of fall. Taking a step away. I think taking a step away actually applies to parents and adults in this situation, because one of my favorite quotes is, when little people are having big emotions, we should give them our calm and not join them in their chaos. And I love that, because I think so often it's so easy to get upset ourselves. Why are you having a temper? It's embarrassing, like especially if you're out, it's embarrassing, people are looking. Why are you getting so upset about like a candy bar? And we get upset and then we add to it, but that doesn't help at all, and I always try to challenge myself. The more upset my child is, the calmer I should be to offset their big emotions, so that I'll help them come back to an equilibrium. So I think there are obviously different strategies, different calming techniques that adults and kids have to use, but I think so much more important is trying to figure out where and why they're having them in the first place.
Great,
Yeah.
Great advice. Yeah. I just have one final question for you. Having worked with so many students, is there a character transformation, a most memorable character transformation that you could share with us?
I do. When we first opened our Character Academy, we had an 11-year-old girl come in, and I remember I was teaching a class on friendship and bullying. And I asked the class, it was a class of girls, and I asked them, oh, how many of you have been bullied before? All of them put their hands up. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll talk about this. But I said, how many of you have bullied other people? And this one girl puts her hand up. And I was like, I applaud you for your honesty. And then, in subsequent conversations and classes, we talked about, what bullying is and how it affects other people and the implications it has and all of that, right? Fast forward a couple months, we were doing a parent introduction talk and just introducing our program to parents. It was like an open house kind of setting. And so the student said that she would be happy to share with parents what she'd been learning about, at JEMS. And I didn't go through it with her. I just said, well, you just share and just be honest. You're a very honest person. Just honestly share what you learned, and I'm sure the parents will, appreciate an insider's view. And she went up in front of about 30 parents at the time, and she said, growing up, I always felt inferior because I have an older brother and sister who are always better, who I felt were always better than me at school and in other ways, and so I always felt I was not good enough. And because of that, I would try to make myself feel better by making other people feel worse. So I would go to school and I would say things or do things that would make people upset and cry. But she was like, in the time that I've been here at JEMS, she was like, I've learned that I'm unique and that I shouldn't be like anyone else, that I have qualities and virtues that other people, that I don't have to emulate, other people. And I can just be happy with who I am. And with that, I don't have to make other people feel worse. And I was like, wow, that's quite something. But a couple weeks after that, her mom called me and said, Christine, I got a call from this girl's school. I was like, that's usually not a good thing when I hear something like that, right? It's like, no, her teacher asked me what she did this year, because at the beginning of the school year, she was bullying other people and making them cry. And at the end of the school year, she's actually helping the people that are on the, that are being bullied and that are crying, and she's actively going to help them. What happened? And so her mom said, well, I think it's something to do with what she shared about, that she's been to this and she's learned that, that she is who she is. She doesn't have to make other people feel worse to make herself feel better. And that's exactly what happened. I remember soon after that, this girl came to me and said, hey, Miss Christine, there's this girl that I know that's feeling really upset and she's having a lot of issues. Like, I really want to be able to help her. How can I best do that? And so we talked about, how we could, assist someone who's going through a lot of emotional issues. And I was just, wow, I was like, a year ago, you're the one sitting here telling me that you're the one making other people cry, and now you're the one helping people that are crying. And for me, that was a big transformation. And we've stayed in touch all these years. She's now working. She's graduated from her master's, and she's now working, but we still stay in touch. And to me, that's very, very special.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, Christine, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Really appreciate you taking out the time to do so. To our viewers, thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed that. We look forward to welcoming you back next time. Thank you.
Thank you.